Welcome everybody. This is November 1st, the first day of OER week here at Front Range Community College. This morning we're just going to have a really quick discussion about our campus's experience with OER and the creation of OER. And we have a three-person panel here that has pretty wide experience with creating OER and disseminating it to students and faculty. So this morning we have Novak, Nicolas Paris, or is it, how do I say your last name, Nicolas?
Paris.
Paris, okay, my fault, thank you.
No problem.
And Anne Riedl, is that correct, Anne?
It's Riedl.
Riedl, my bad, okay, cool. So, good start for the moderator and names. Anyway, so we're going to have Nicolas, Kay, and Anne introduce themselves. And the first question is really just focusing on any OER projects that they've actually worked with or created while they've been here at FRCC. So I'll have them introduce themselves and kind of talk about their OER projects. So let's start with Kay. Kay, take it away.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Kay Novak. I'm the Assistant Director of Learning Design for online learning. Because I'm a learning designer, it's not what I work with isn't in particularly my course. It's helping people bring it into different courses. And I would have to say when it comes to OER, what I've been working with people more than say a textbook has been learning objects. Is instead learning objects. So discrete activities, decisions about what kind of pictures can I bring in that are under the public domain or can be attributed. What kind of content can I bring into my course, and where can I get it from? So those are the things that I've been working with most. So, but I think that your other panelists can talk to more to textbooks.
All right, let's hear from Anne. Anne, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your OER projects?
Sure. I'm Anne Riedl. I'm a biology faculty member at Westminster campus, and I have done a textbook, but along with Kay, I've also done other activities and modules that go. So the modules I do have been in SoftChalk, which is an interactive software where you can put activities, videos, a little bit of text, and it's sort of a way for the students to work through the information before class instead of just reading the textbook. They have something more interactive. And then I did adopt an OpenStax textbook, which I didn't like very much, so I rewrote it, and I exchanged out the figures with figures that I made because I like mine better, and I added a lot. My goal was to put at least one figure on each page. So I added quite a few figures and pictures. And then in addition, for my online class, I use the Google Slide activities. So we have interactive activities that they can do as groups where they can move things around on the slides and model some of the more difficult concepts.
Excellent, thank you, Anne. And Nicolas, let's hear from you.
Yeah, let's see. So I have some experience designing or kind of building a Frankenstein of textbooks similar to Anne's experience for a research course. And then I have kind of curated lots of open OER and that kind of thing for my one of my courses. I teach 3 courses, 2 online and 1 hybrid for Boulder County campus, and all of them are OER at this point, or at least open access, no cost. And so I've done some curation for my online courses. Those are kind of Frankenstein together, and then I'm looking forward to bringing in, fingers crossed, the proposal gets accepted to the OER Council and the funding comes through to finally put together a more solid textbook for my hybrid course in the TESOL, Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages course that I teach. So kind of a mix of experiences there.
That's great. So it sounds like our panel obviously has a lot of experience with OER and creating textbooks, and in Kay's experience, learning objects and helping others incorporate OER. So that's really neat. So my next question to the panel is, what led you as an instructor or a designer to want to work with OER materials or create them for your students? So whoever wants to go first, whoever wants to talk first.
I'll start because I am I have a lot to say about that. The number one thing, of course, was cost. I mean, biology textbooks are phenomenally expensive, and by haggling and doing everything I could only get it down to $150 using publisher content. And when I surveyed students, at the end of every semester, I did a survey about what was most helpful and what did you use the most and what would you like to see more of in the class. And every single student, there was actually only one student out of the entire class who didn't put the textbook last. So then I had this situation where they were spending the most money for the thing they used the least, and that just wasn't okay, right? So and the other piece was that when like most teachers, I would say, read the textbook before you come to class, read the chapter, make sure you come prepared. And most of my students would try. But if they could read a biology textbook and get what they needed out of it before class, they wouldn't need my class, right? I mean, that is a very, very sophisticated thing to be able to do. And I think we were just asking way too much of our students to take this very dense, not very well written textbook and get what they needed out of it before class. It just wasn't working. So I wanted to make materials that they could do before class that were more interactive, a little bit lower level, more first time through the material kind of thing. And then have the textbook something that they could use as a reference, but that wasn't the major thing they were supposed to do, is get the information from that textbook. And then also provide the textbook for free because they weren't using it that much anyway.
Thanks, Anne. What about Kay? Anything that led you to want to work with OER materials?
Well, yeah, because the publisher textbooks weren't doing it. Publisher, what the publishers usually do is that they go very mainstream. They go very, very much like what is everyone teaching, and they usually don't come up with very creative ways of presenting the material. Okay, and the thing about it is, as Anne was saying, it's not in a way that the students can get it right off the bat. So creating OER objects meant doing something differently and really thinking about where front range students are and what they needed and how to engage them and how to inspire them. Because textbook publishers and the material they produce is usually very slick looking. From if you look at what they produce, you go, oh, that's done well, that looks professional. But quite honestly, the research out of MIT and Harvard say that students want their instructors. Students want things that their instructors do. Students want the YouTube video from their instructor who says 5 times and is irreverent. They want that more than any slick or polished video that was created by a publisher. So, I mean, for OER, using OER, doing the connections and then creating your OER is really a way for you to connect to your students and to your students to connect back to you. So OER means that customization. It means connecting to your students. So that's what, and I do also teach. That's what leads me when I use OER. But it also is when we're designing a course, especially an online course. How are you going to connect to your students? And using OER helps with that.
Thank you, Kay. That was great. And Nicolas, what led you to OER creation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I share the same sentiment that Anne does. The cost was one thing. The applied linguistics, the field hasn't moved that far in the last 20 or 30 years, and to charge someone close to $100 or more for materials and things that haven't changed too much was just kind of is beyond me. I didn't want to do it, and I think it's a barrier to enrollments and that kind of thing. And it's a CTE program, so career and technical ed program. So I wanted to. Those were kind of compounded in my mind. But the other big thing that I've really enjoyed is that it's an opportunity to revitalize my understanding of the field, dive into new readings and materials, and take a really, so this is very much my own teacher perspective, and what I go and share and talk about at conferences like the teaching professors conference. And it's all just about revitalizing and kind of reviewing my own knowledge of my subject matter and expertise, and looking at the new readings and articles coming out and that kind of thing, and just kind of revitalizes and reinvigorates me as well. I get really excited again about what I teach, which is probably too much energy to begin with. So yeah, that's my own kind of personal win from it. It's not just a student thing. It's also just I get energy from it, and it's exciting to dive back into a passion and love that I get to share with students.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. That's my favorite thing about OER really is how it is student focused, and it's really aimed at making information more accessible, especially from a cost perspective. I always tell when I do reference or instruction courses, I always tell the students that I understand their pain when it comes to buying textbooks. There were definitely weeks in my undergraduate career where it was like, I'm going to eat peanut butter so I can buy this physics book, and we'll see how long I can last on like a $10, a week allowance for food. So that's a terrible situation to put anyone in, including our students. So we really appreciate it as librarians, the work you're doing for the students, and focusing on the costs and those issues that come with publishers. And I really like the comment about how publishers definitely do make their products very slick looking. As a librarian, there are times where I'm like, oh, that's a beautiful book, but do I really know what's in it, or is it actually engaging students? Probably not. Who knows? So anyway, thank you for those answers. So the next question kind of goes to your personal experience in the challenge side of creating OER. What challenges or issues have you come across when developing your materials? And we're on Nick, so let's start with Nick again.
Yeah, so I guess one of the biggest challenges would be, so when I'm kind of creating, when I'm using existing materials that are licensed in a variety of ways through Creative Commons, understanding how what I'm working with, if I can use it, and then ultimately how I need to license it in my newer version. There are some nuances to certain types of Creative Commons licenses that don't play well or really work at all together and shouldn't really be used together. And understanding those was pretty important. I had the good fortune of the state paying for me to go through Creative Commons certificate for a program for educators, which really gave me some really good insight. But there's just some great materials out there that's all open source. The course is open source as well, so you don't necessarily have to pay the cost to look at their materials, and kind of get a sense for what licenses can be combined, what materials can be reused or remixed in certain phrasing. So that was definitely a challenge. And then for I'd mentioned applied linguistics is kind of there's not a whole lot of material out there in comparison to other subject matter like biology or things like that, or 101 courses or something. So it was kind of a challenge to find things, but then I just get to create and dive into my subject matter again. So was a good challenge. A challenge is the right word there.
Excellent, thank you. Anne, any challenges or issues when creating your OER?
Yeah, the big challenge for me was time. It's incredibly time intensive, and I did it before there were grants, so I just did it. It has to be something you really believe in, because the amount of time and energy you're going to pour into it are huge. I do like the idea of getting, looking at what's out there. But I ended up in most cases, I think because of what Kay said, is the students really want what the instructor's viewpoint and the instructor's materials. I ended up creating most of the things that I did by myself. So it's exactly, I think the reason the students like it is because then they know it's exactly what you want them to know. Whereas a publisher textbook or anything you pull off the web, even a good YouTube video you pull off the web, is going to either pitch it too low 9 times out of 10 or too high. And then the students aren't sure, well, do I have to know all the names of those other chemicals in there, or because we didn't cover those in class? And then you just have this disconnect where the students don't know exactly what you expect. So I have created most of my materials myself, which again, then you come across the time. It's very, very time intensive to make figures and videos. But it's rewarding, like Nicolas was saying. It's worth it in the end. And now I don't have to create them again because they're exactly what I wanted.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne. And Kay, any issues you'd like to speak about?
Okay, yes. And I'm going to use props. Okay. Now this is a concern of mine. I've worked on some projects that we're making sure that we did culturally relevant pedagogy. And what has been happening a lot is that OER sometimes is limited on choices. And we found, and I actually got this written to my goals this year, working on basically what would be if you're looking for culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally sustaining, culturally responsive, what kind of tests can you start putting in your specific area? And Anne, I got one thing to show you here. I'll start with the first one that's like really quickly for the English people, the Bechdel-Wallace test. If you're picking a video, if you're picking literature, whatever you're picking, is the work that you're picking, does it feature at least 2 women who talk to each other other than the relationship that they're going to be having? So when you're looking for that video, if you're looking for that book, if you're looking for things, how do you make sure that you don't get stuck in that? And then and we're trying to combine all of these together to figure out how we do this, the Finkbeiner science test. If there is an article about a female scientist, does it mention that she's a woman? Does it mention her husband's job, her childcare arrangements, that she's a role model? This was called the Finkbeiner test, and it's named after a female science journalist who is looking to have articles written about women that don't cover this. And then this is when I threw in Maki Mori test. I'm a gamer. If you've ever seen Pacific Rim, Maki Mori inside that, her character, she's an arc for all the male characters. When you're looking at what you're picking, do you see this? This one is a Duvernay test, and this is if you do have whether it's a video or whether it's a book or whether it's an article, whatever you're picking, if there is people of color, are there 2 names characters of color? Do they have dialogue? Are they not romantically involved with each other? Is one definitely not a magic stock character? Is the only dialogue they're having comforting or supporting a white character? So I'll stop the share there. But basically, for me, the problem I'm seeing and something that we have to develop is when we find the OER material, we can usually find 1 or 2 things does it truly represent our students and our students' experience? So that's a project I'll be working on over this year. So that's a problem I've seen with OER. And I'm just going to say one little thing. I'm on an OER listserv, and I know some other people are on the OER are on some of the OER listservs. Just this morning, a question came over, and I believe it's a librarian asking, someone asked me for a novel that's multicultural, that's been written within the last 100 years, right? And all I have to think about that is, who's this professor or instructor in their field who can't give the librarian more to go on than that? And shouldn't that person be looking at at diversity in their field? Like, I mean, I was like that short little question that librarian was asked. It just made me go, we need to think about this more, rather than this person who gave this checkbox kind of question to the librarian. So I'll stop there. Sorry, it was long.
No, that was great. Thank you, Kay. Yeah, equity and diversity in OER and any material, obviously, is something we need to aim for more these days. Yeah.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to interject. Thank you so much for the props. Just as more of a visual learner, it was good to go on that. So thank you.
Cool. All right, moving along. The next question you all have kind of answered a little bit along the way, but we'll just go ahead and ask it just to make sure we get everything included today in our chat. How do students and other stakeholders that you're presenting your OER materials respond? Do you get feedback or critiques or any sort of information on how you could make your OER better, or are they perfect? I just want to hear what folks that are using these OER are saying. So whoever wants to jump in first.
I would jump in with a term that I know we have OER experts here, so that they'll be familiar with the term, but not necessarily everybody else is. But open pedagogy with reusable assignments, meaning you have your students do an assignment and you keep it. You get their permission and you keep it, and then you use it for the next semester to show other students how other students have done this before. And I know that the courses that I've done learning design with, that we've put those things in there, that students have like seeing what other students have done. And also the students who get asked, can I keep your project? It's like a point of pride for them. Like, oh yeah, my project's being kept to be shown for next semester, or my essay. So I would put in a plug for what they call open pedagogy, or killing the disposable assignment. So I'd put a plug in that for that.
Yeah, it's always it's a nice surprise. I would hope. I get a lot of emails leading up to a semester saying, "Hey, what are the textbooks? Can't wait to meet you." Just to get like 1 to 2 of those, more depending on the size of the class. But and then I have the wonderful news of there is no textbook cost and that kind of thing. So I think that's always a really enjoyable note of sharing that far and wide, that there's no cost to the class. In regards to textbooks, there is a cost, but so that's always a really nice note. And then I do look for feedback on the materials, and they have helped me improve them, or at least find and in the cases where I'm using existing stuff and modifying it or remixing it slightly, changing the words, or they've helped me kind of revise my materials a bit so that it's more readable, or making it a little bit more relevant, giving it more context, that kind of thing. So I'm always looking for that kind of feedback to move just to improve my materials, and kind of in the same spirit of what Kay was getting at, the open pedagogy and the idea that it's to a degree, or wherever in a perfect world, it'd be completely co-created, but wherever I can get their insight.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience where I have asked students, if there's a particular section of the textbook that's confusing that you have trouble with, please let me know because I can fix it. And I think that they love that, right? They love that I care enough to ask them, and that I tell them they get an extra credit point if they find a mistake in any of my materials. And they've been responsive to that. Less so recently, I think, because, I've had this textbook now for 7 or 8 years, and I think the mistakes have been found for the most part. But yeah, when I used a publisher textbook, I never had students thank me, right, for the materials in the course, and now they do. They say, thank you for making the soft talks. They make it so much easier for us. And it's a nice feeling. I mean, they thank me for it being free on the first day, but then usually by the end of the course, they're thanking me just for having created it.
Yeah, no, again, I think that's one of my favorite parts about OER is how students can be involved with actually creating their own textbook. And the idea that you could fix a textbook to meet the needs of a student or your class as a whole is wonderful. Again, I think back to, I was a history major, and so I think back to like some of my elective courses where I had to buy a textbook, like economics. That's the one that always stands out in my mind because I remember that being a very expensive book. We probably used maybe 25% of the actual textbook, and I sold it back to the bookstore for like $20, and so I would have loved to have modified that economics textbook to understand what was actually happening with supply and demand and all of that good stuff. So that is a great service that you're doing for your students. And then, yeah, the open pedagogy is also a great thing for folks to mention. Thank you, Kay. I think that is a wonderful, that's probably, yeah, like I said, my favorite thing about OER is how students can be involved in creating it themselves. So that's wonderful. So I have one last question, and obviously we have, I scheduled this for 45 minutes, but obviously we can leave whenever, but this last question is for the folks that will probably or hopefully watch this video later. What advice would you give other FRCC instructors and interested parties wanting to incorporate OER into their classroom or their design? So whoever would like to go first with advice for the future OER creators?
My biggest advice is talk to your colleagues and find out who's already doing it. Because I mean, some people are doing it and they don't even call it OER. Instead they go, like it's the philosophy department, and go, well, we have PDFs of everything. and it's public, it's public domain. And I'm like, that's OER. Okay, so I would say talk to your colleagues, find out who's already using OER, and ask them, what are you using? And that'd be my first one. My second one is all the librarians here. Okay. Go visit your okay, maybe not virtually visit all your librarians, okay, and have them help you. Okay, so those would be my 2 pieces.
Thank you, Kay. Those are wonderful. That's wonderful advice.
I also have 2, and one is get a grant, right? I mean, the grants are out there. Get the money, pay yourself, because it'll take more hours than you think it will take, right? It's just going to be a lot, but if you can get paid for it, do that. And then the second thing is, it's okay to start small. A lot of people think, if I don't just like throw my textbook away this semester and start from scratch and, adopt this, all this new stuff, that's probably not feasible in one semester. So you can start small. You can make a couple of modules or a couple of activities for the students to do before class and sort of start adding them in slowly. And then as you get more comfortable with it, it'll just sort of snowball, and then you'll write a textbook. That's how it happens.
Excellent. Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, I guess I had all the same thoughts as Kay and Anne here. Take your time, give yourself plenty of time. Look for it's a world of open, so there's so much out there that's already that you can look and find. There was a conference just last week. There's more conferences to come. There's this week and the resources. I was also going to plug all the librarians on this call. There's 3 of them, so contact them because this is their space. Librarians operate in this OER space a lot. It's textbooks material, it's right there. And Front Range is doing some great work with labeling courses, OER, open textbooks, and that kind of thing. And the incentives, I'm on the OER council. There's money to be had. So definitely the proposal form is kind of long, but it's not too long to get yourself paid for this work. So definitely use all the resources possible. But yeah.
All right. Thank you, Nicolas. And thank you, everyone, for attending our open discussion. No pun intended about open there. To kick off OER week. This was the first event of the week. So we'll have another panel discussion on Wednesday if anyone wants to attend. And on behalf of Victoria and Shay, again, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk to us about your OER experience and provide advice for anyone that's hoping to create their own materials in the future. And that will conclude our discussion for this morning. So again, thank you so much for everyone attending, and we'll hope to see you soon in the future talking about OER.